Thank you very much. It's fair to say I didn't follow an enormous amount of that, but and I think the app looked fantastic, but it also kind of reminds me of when one of our products doesn't work and people hold it up and the screen's flashing strangely, and it makes me feel a tiny bit uncomfortable. Anyway, so thank you very much for having me. I'm going to talk about how we go about sort of engagement, digital engagement, social engagement with our fans. So start off talking a little bit about the club, and then about the platforms and the channels that we communicate through, and then our approach to engagement. But like everybody else, I'm going to start with a video.
Here come the teams. Flash bulbs go off all around the stadium. And there is no doubt Old Trafford feels like it's had a whole new lease of life after a pretty dramatic summer.
It's a glorious night for Manchester United.
Into Sheringham, and Solskjaer has won it!
Everyone eager to see the young men whose fame has rung round Europe.
Best again. What a player this boy is, he's got another!
Scholes hits one! Oh, what a goal!
But they've completed the most famous league and cup double in sport.
Robinson saved it! United again!
Bruce, yes! Yes for Manchester United!
United are the champions!
Rooney! Oh, wonderful!
Headed down! Oh, Ibrahimovic!
Not burdened by the history that they create. They know what is expected of them. They are Manchester United.
So making me chuckle to see there were some similarities with the FC Barcelona video earlier. I mean, I think the premise on which I'd kind of present this, and the premise on which we present ourselves to an extent to our sponsor community and to the outside world, is that football, stroke soccer, is the #1 sport in the world, and I'll come back to that in a minute. And off the back of research we've undertaken, we would say that Manchester United is the #1 club, and that gives us an amazing opportunity in terms of the way that we reach out and connect to our fans, and how we can use that connectivity to support our partners and sponsors, so operate as a marketing platform. Now, in terms of where the statistic comes from, we undertook a survey a few years ago with Kantar and Futures Research, and it was the largest ever sports survey undertaken. 54,000 interviews in 39 territories, and we asked a number of questions across a range of different areas. And one of them was about what sport it is that you follow. So football came out indexed here as the #1 sport. It's interesting to see basketball, tennis, Formula One as the next few. And this previously, when this we've done the survey before, and at that stage, table tennis actually was the second largest sport in the world. But as you can imagine, a lot of this is driven by the globality of sport and the globality of basketball and soccer, in particular in Asia and Southeast Asia. And we asked a number of questions. The other kind of question we asked was, what football clubs do you follow? And off the back of that, it established that we have a global fan base of 659 million fans and followers around the world. And that is by asking the open question, who do you follow, and people saying Manchester United. Now, as you might expect, a number of people in a number of territories, the way that their fandom works is different. So in somewhere like the UK, it's likely that they'll follow one club in the Premier League. In other territories around the world, they may follow several clubs, and several of those clubs will be across different leagues, and that might include us, it might include Real Madrid, it might include FCB as well. But essentially, what this represents is an amazing opportunity for storytelling, because such a wide fan base, and obviously digital plays a fundamental part in how we can connect to that fan base. I think the other thing that's kind of essentially important here is the fact that as a sports club we have a fantastic history and a fantastic legacy. So, and there is no doubt that the Manchester United as a club is a club that's enjoyed great success, but it's also significant tragedy in its history with the Munich air disaster. And I think part of the story of having to rebuild itself after sort of falling to its knees is what makes it a compelling brand, particularly for fans across the world to engage with. And the other thing that is extremely important for us is the emphasis on youth. So we have a world-class academy, and a youth academy player is featured in the first team squad for every game since October the 30th, 1937, which is a sort of fabulous achievement and reflected over the past couple of years by the emergence of some amazing players, particularly a fellow called Marcus Rashford, who appeared after somebody was injured in a warm-up. Nobody knew who he was, and he came on and scored in his first game in the Europa League, and then has went on to play for England in the same season and be one of the fastest young England scorers ever on his debut. So, incredibly important part of our story, a fabulous global fan base and an amazing history and a legacy. And so for me, and I look after all of our kind of media channels, and particularly the storytelling element of that offers a fabulous opportunity. So just to set the scene, I mean, obviously, as we talked about, we use a kind of variety of different ways to connect with our fan base. And I think one of the points here is we live in a slightly crazy media world, and a world where there is, particularly with this brand, there is so much noise, and so much speculation, so much discussion about it, that we have to be quite careful about how we present ourselves as the brand and what our remit is in that. And so at the heart of it, our story is official and it's accurate. So we are the point of truth in a world that is mostly devoid of it in the speculation about the club. And then the other opportunity for us is essentially the proximity we have to the biggest asset, which is the players themselves. And that's what our fans and followers want to know about. So being able to open the door on the behind-the-scenes access and to be entertaining means that for us, we need to become the ultimate destination for fans and followers if we want to leverage the opportunity that this connectivity gives us. And in terms of content production, I mean, we're a fairly substantial media business for a single sports club. So we have around 85 people in the media business, and we have our own linear TV channel, MUTV. So we produce TV, digital video content. We have our own photography team, and interestingly, when we talk about engagement, it's interesting how often photography isn't mentioned. And we're talking about innovation here, but images are about the most engaged with content. And having a fantastic in-house capability is really important, and writing. And writing is also extremely important. And when it comes down to it, even though we are using incredibly sophisticated tools and platforms, we rely incredibly heavily on core journalistic, editorial, and creative skills. And then obviously the platforms that we use are traditional. So we have our own, as I've talked about, linear TV channel, MUTV. That's available in the UK and Ireland on subscription, but we syndicate it globally, and we launched our own OTT digital proposition, an app in February this year. It's available in 170 countries globally. So we also have a website. We have a series of kind of mobile products, but not in all markets in the world. So strangely, in some of our biggest markets at the moment, you can't access a mobile app. And then obviously we work extensively across sort of social media. And one of the side things here is that, like every organization, we've been reflective about where we need to get to digitally, and we're undertaking a fairly substantial project to rebuild absolutely everything. So we have a digital transformation partner who's doing everything and all our back end and all our front end re-engineering. So I talked through those. Obviously, the final thing here is to touch on print. Again, in an innovative or a fast-moving world, print might seem to have lost any particular relevance, but actually, producing a match day program is a fundamentally important part of why people want to come. They want to come. It's an amazing experience. They want to take something away with them in their hand. So we still focus very strongly on an extremely high-quality product, and then we produce books and we produce magazines globally. And although some of the markets are decreasing, they're not decreasing as quickly as you might think for these types of products. Now, I touched on, obviously, the kind of massive reach, and I think this is one of the areas where, if I talk about digital engagement, there is no doubt it is driven by the power of the kind of broadcast penetration of our matches. And so this is riding off the back of the distribution of Premier League live rights. And so in terms of the global TV audience for Manchester United matches, it's in the sort of 3 billion area. And according to the research that we've undertaken, that means 80% of the world's households can access Manchester United matches, which is kind of astonishing. But at the same time, I see that one of our in the digital side, one of our main objectives is to leverage that connectivity. So in terms of our social platform base, we're on 11 platforms. We communicate in 20 different languages. And we're just under 140 million connected social followers, which, again, is a kind of eye-watering number, but one that still represents sort of a massive opportunity and I think a gift for us. And this is just a breakdown of the platforms that we're on and the sort of scale and reach of those platforms. I'm not going to run through all of them. Facebook's the biggest. We're actually, and this is kind of peculiar for our brand, but we're actually very slow to move into social media. So probably the last of the major football clubs to move onto all of these platforms, the last Premier League club to go onto Twitter. Sounds like a weird thing to acknowledge, but it's a nature of the brand that we are not an inventor. We tend to stand and watch and look at how things play out in the market and then ask ourselves the question how we can go onto them, but go onto them in the best way that we possibly can and potentially learn from the mistakes that other people make. So the other thing is, I've talked a lot about followers, but if anyone here is involved in social media, you'll know that the whole emphasis is switching from the follower base to how engaged your followers actually are. So we undertake a kind of continual sets of research into comparing ourselves to other brands, to other leagues and everything like that. And this gives a sense of the kind of buzz that's generated around our matches. So just to give a sense of how an average what I call a top 6 match, so us playing a Premier League team like Chelsea, Liverpool, Manchester City, Spurs, Arsenal would kind of compare in terms of the general level of social buzz to other types of sports clubs. And this one's the same thing, but looking outside of football. And the other thing here is, we do like to compare ourselves to other celebrities, and it is slightly disturbing that Donald Trump is catching up. But it is also quite hard work to keep pace with him in terms of the way he operates. But just to, again, give a sense, I mean, we're the 21st largest Facebook page and the largest from the UK, and it kind of throws us a challenge. And the challenge is, as I said before, how can we convert that connectivity into something that is valuable for us and for our fans? So as we talk about engagement, and I see I've sort of talked about this, our challenge is very much about positioning ourselves in a world where there is an awful lot of noise about Manchester United. So we work very closely with our partner Adidas. Adidas is an enormously innovative and creative organization. This is an Adidas video that they put together around a time where there was an awful lot of speculation about us signing a French player.
Shut up, man. Talk about me, you better hashtag problem. Hashtag problem. Adidas crepes, don't ask what I've got. Don't ask what they are, don't ask if I cop them. I go half of my team, I go half of my squad. God's wrong to stay when you power man fear. Couple skank man and shower man here. Shower man down and my shower man gear. First, never follow. Where do you know me from? 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 Where do you know me from?
Okay, so what I think is interesting about that is it probably goes a little further than we might with some of our own productions in terms of sort of finger poking at the amount of noise that's made up about us. But what I really wanted to sort of pause on a little bit here was how we internally go about trying to build engagement. And for us, I think there are three key sort of areas here. One is understanding fan behavior. The other is the tools and the technical capability that we need. And the third is the sort of person capability. But in terms of understanding fan behavior, the way that we work is looking at it as a series of building blocks. And the building blocks are pretty simple, but it's about understanding why it is that people are fans of sports clubs. And obviously the first one is identification. So that is that people want to align with a common goal, a sense of belonging, and so on. Second is participation, and this is completely obvious. It's literally being part of the crowd and being able to share experiences. Third one, collection, and to an extent production, is about displaying allegiance. So obviously I talked about match day programs, talked about, as everybody who's a sports fan or has kids who are sports fans would know, that collecting jerseys, collecting memorabilia, and then showing them off is a fundamental part of fandom. But what's really interesting is how that translates into production. So obviously there's been a couple of mentions of user-generated content, but one of the drivers for user-generated content is this element of this kind of collective desire to be part of a brand, to be part of the content that's created around it, and so on. Obviously knowledge. Knowledge is incredibly important, and you can see that I think the US sports, in particular US sports leagues, have been the leaders in providing extensive amounts of knowledge to fans who use it as a badge of authority. And that's why outside of sports performance, but in the environment of sports communication, statistics is so important. It is because it becomes part of the collateral that fans use to compare their fandom to one another. And then finally, interaction. And obviously that's interaction at a number of different levels. That's fan to fan, that's club to fan, that's fan to club. All of them fundamental building blocks. And when we look at what our strategy for engagement is, we need to align with each of those types of building block. The other is tools. And obviously, this is the area where there's incredibly innovative technology. And we use a fairly complex stack of tools that range from things like social listening, so that we can track and listen to what's being said about us, what's being said about who we perceive to be competitor brands, what's being said about our players, and then adjust our messaging and our communication, our publishing accordingly. But then there is also, as you might expect, tracking and analytics tools. So we use a range of tools to track off our own platforms, things like image distribution, sort of image recognition, visual recognition of certain types of thing. And then on-platform analytics, which is enormously important. So that's using social platform analytics, that's using third-party tools to measure behavior on social platforms, and it's using a set of tools to measure engagement on our own platforms. And then the final piece there is the ability to test, and that is fundamentally important because I've talked a bit about the scale that we have, and to some extent it's a gift. And I think what I often ask myself and I ask the team is, we have an amazing gift. But what we have to ask ourselves or pat ourselves on the back for is not how big we are, but how better we are as a team than any other group of people who have this gift. And so being able to optimize what we do is essentially important. And having the tools to allow us to do that is essentially important. And the final one is capabilities. And obviously that's the capability to aggregate data. But as everybody here will appreciate, we live in a very data-rich world, and it's far more challenging to extract insight from that data than it is just to produce spreadsheet after spreadsheet after spreadsheet. And so just to give a sense of it, I mean, we're a relatively small organization, our media business, but we have a team of 5 analytics, dedicated analytics and digital optimization people within a content creation organization, and that team's growing. It's extremely important to us. And so how does that reflect in the way we work? Well, obviously we try to meet fans where they are, and that means we have to go to the platforms our fans live on. We live in a world also where kind of a lot of people will say, well, you've got to try and pull them onto your own platforms. And the answer is, people behave in a way that they behave. So we need to go to the tools and the platforms and the areas that they are. And then we need to story tell to them in a way that resonates with those platforms. So our approach to every single platform we communicate on is completely different. And then our objective is to create conversation as far as possible. I mean, we're not completely immersed in conversation. We don't engage quite as directly as we could with some fans and some influencers. But what we want to do is make our engagement interactive and to give people reasons to come back to us and reasons to share with us. And again, I talked a little bit about the languages we operate in, and it's really important in the majority of cases that that's localization, not translation. So it has to be speaking to fans in a voice that they understand, but in a culturally appropriate voice as well. And obviously that we're producing content that reflects the platforms and the tools and the channels that people might consume it on. And then I'm wondering if the noise ringing means I can get the 5 minutes I lost back when you started the little piece before. Anyway, I'll carry on. And obviously we analyze it really heavily. So I'm going to canter through a couple of campaigns. This one was an incredibly successful social campaign. I'm not going to go into all the detail here. I think one of the things I would say about this, again, is this particular signing wasn't news. It was one of the most speculated football transfers that's ever taken place. By the time we announced it, it was actually old news. But we were tapping into one of the fan behaviors, which is about wanting to align with us and basically pump your fist. That's why player signings are incredibly big social events for football clubs. And one of the things I would say about this is that we took a conscious decision to launch this between 12 and 1 a.m. in the UK, which meant that it landed in people's inboxes in different time zones around the world when it was going to be more engaging for them. So it's nothing particularly clever about that at all. It's just trying to think about where the audience base is and how to speak to them. I also talked about how interactivity is really important, and for us, building the bridge between a digital connectivity and a physical connectivity is also extremely important. So we ran a series of I Love United fan parties. We take over sort of theatres or small communal spaces, deck them out with flags, run a live game in territory, send our legends over, work with the host broadcaster, and then produce kind of really fun, crazy events where local fans who we engage with in a kind of completely localized way across social platforms can come and experience what it could be like to go to Old Trafford and sort of engage around the match. And so we built a series of campaigns that were only operating in these target markets. We did them in Vietnam, India, China, Thailand this year. And again, saw actually some not huge numbers. I mean, huge, I guess, we've had about 8 million social kind of engagements with these events, but very, very highly engaged within market, which is what we're trying to achieve. And then one I wanted to just touch on here was something which kind of plays back to the knowledge side, which I talked about. This was actually a product that we launched last year called I Love United. And what this is a standalone mobile digital product where as a fan you go and you enter a certain amount of information, your name and your age and what country you come from. And that's it. But what it does is it runs through our entire historical stats database, and it creates, as you kind of go on the platform, a whole load of interactive stats which tell you a number of things. How many goals have been scored since you were born, players who share your birthday, how many managers, what was the most sort of the trophies that have been acquired since you were born, and so on. And what it does is it just gives, it's really simple, just gives fans a really personalized experience, and then it creates this infographic which is downloadable, printable, and shareable. There is just it's actually really simple, And again, it's interesting because sports clubs, are in the habit of providing an awful lot of statistical data on their platforms. But just to reach out a little further to fans and give it to them made a big difference. And we won a number of awards, but most importantly, had a lot of really warm, positive sentiment from the fans who used it. And then finally, it's an incredible opportunity to work with partners. And so I would say that, when it comes back down to what's at the root of it is about trying to make our platforms work for our partners. And we're lucky that we have incredibly creative and innovative partners. So obviously Adidas, for whom football's an enormous sort of business. We launched our kit with them in Shanghai, but then we've got kind of the bottom picture here is players playing FIFA 17, EA Sports, one of our partners, and a video of players playing on FIFA 17 is our most viewed partner video that we've released this season. The one that's slightly hidden is our partner Chevrolet orchestrated a proposal at Old Trafford. So that is a guy proposing to his girlfriend who he'd enticed there, offering her a tour of the stadium, and then he proposed, and somewhat shocked, she said yes. And it actually is the most engaged with non-football piece of content that we've produced. And then finally, that one of Pogba there is just, we launched a partnership with Deezer, the music streaming service. And again, interesting partners in a digital environment to work with creates very engaging campaigns. So I'm just going to finish off with one final video.
Oh, damn it. Al! I had that weird Wayne Rooney dream again. Whew. Gotta stop eating kebabs before nap time. Oh, he's so adorable.
So I guess we're lucky because we got partners who we can create that kind of content with. And that ended up being one of the kind of most viewed partner video we've ever made, and you can kind of see why when you're working with someone like 20th Century Fox. But the bigger point is the amount of work that goes in behind the scenes to making sure that this is the type of content that will work and will resonate with our fans and followers, and that will be distributed and published at kind of the times that will work for them. So it was just an example, really, of probably the coming together of the way that we approach engagement. And that's it from me.